Welcome to another edition of Strange New Pod. I am your Fleet Admiral and host, Julian Brown, alongside the best bridge crew, this side of a K7 bartender being asked one too many times for a Ractigino. That's hold on.
Something's up?
Yeah. I'm going to do that again because my roadcaster decided to be funny right as we started the show. At least it happened now. That's good.
Yes.
That's very good.
I heard the tone in your voice kind of change.
The mic changed. Yeah, it does this like every now and then sometimes. It's really weird. Anyway, I'm going to start over. Welcome to another edition of Strange New Pod. I am your Fleet Admiral and host, Julian Brown, alongside the best bridge crew this side of a K7 bartender being asked one too many times for a frickin' Ractigino. I put a frickin' in there this time because why not? Commander Hawk is here, ready to tickle a heart. Please don't, though, because you don't have a medical degree. I'd like to talk to a doctor. I am a doctor, a real doctor. No, I am a doctor. That's a Barbie reference for anybody who's seen that. It's so good. And Commander MC is here tonight and is just happy that Chapel had next to no scenes with Spock this week. And the ones that she did have were actually...
we will talk about.
We will talk about. That's right. Vice Admiral Eric had a shuttle malfunction and Rutherford is slacking getting that replacement part to him. So
get on it, Rutherford.
Dude, come on, man. I know you're better than that. Come on. Buffer time, not buffer time. And Captain Giraffe is off this week, but she was representing us on Star Trek Discovery Pod last night. So I highly suggest you go check that out over on their YouTube channel. Good friends of ours. Welcome back, guys. Welcome aboard. How are you two doing? Good. Good. So also, as you can see, joining us on our view screen tonight are very, very dear friends, Ashlyn and Rhianna from the Duras Sisters Podcast. Welcome back.
Yay, happy to be here.
I'm
so eager
good.
to jump in.
Right?
I'm like, I'm doing well. Let's go.
This is like that episode where we're going to jump in and it's probably going to be like nonstop because it's that episode of Strange New Worlds. It is so good to have you guys back. What have you guys been up to? How are things?
Things are great. We just got back from visiting each other in Virginia with our little sister for the week. That was really fun. And yeah, now we're just thriving on our engineering series currently. So,
which is awesome. We were just talking about your watch list off mic and how much hell Ashlyn's probably going to have to go through to write the DS9 one.
Yeah. Good luck. I'll let you deal with that, Ashlyn.
We'll happily take it. Yeah.
Yeah, right. It's awesome to have you guys back. We're so excited to be doing this episode. I did invite you just thinking and knowing before we even got our screeners. Well, right when we got our screeners, hey, it's the Klingon episode, and we talked way before Strange New Worlds even started. There's going to be Klingon, so we have to have you guys at one point. We got the deep one though. So
yes,
here we are, which is right up your guys' alley. So it's perfect.
Totally.
Before we get into everything, we're going to say this on every single podcast until people get what they deserve and get their due. This live stream and podcast was recorded during the 2023 WGA and SAG-AFTRA strikes. Without the labor of the writers and actors currently on strike, the Star Trek series that we cover and love on this show wouldn't exist. So we are in full support of the writers and the actors to get what they deserve. I'll also say this on every single show. Just look at what they're trying to do with AI, and if it doesn't terrify you, it's awful.
Then you obviously haven't seen season 2 of Discovery.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. So
Period.
Pay your writers, pay your actors. Stop it with this AI nonsense. So with that being said, this week on the pod, what happens when a Klingon defector turned Federation ambassador, Dak'Rah, son of Raul, is welcomed aboard the Enterprise? How do M'Benga, Chapel, and Ortegas react? What do we learn about Chapel and M'Benga's roles during the Klingon War and during the Siege of Jagal? And what terrible truth do we learn about M'Benga? We are going to break that all down, but first, MC, you are up. It is your turn to thank our patron collective members at the Ready Room level and above. And the list keeps getting longer for you, so apologies.
It does. Yeah. Thank you to Jeff Reeve, Mariah Goss,
Tallulah, Jen Stein, Tina Alexander, Joe Saporito, Noe Santos, Ken Hui, Taco Nagumo, Kara Kennedy, Fernanda Nogales, SMK, Laura Linderman, Colin Davidson, Alan Davis, Jesco, Michael Graham, Emily and Travis, Gildara, Cassie, The Homework Stealing Vulcan, Maggie Light, Spapple, Wayne Ritz, Scone of Arc, Sean, Jay Howard, Anna Uridon, Mehalani Uchiyama, Matt Herker, Joshua Lewis, David Willett, Tara Paulin, Slope74, Rude Parakeet, Joshua Miller, Adam Sanders, Eris Spenjan, Lanky Guy, Cynthia Markey, Aaron Waltke, Carl Angoli, Michael Kwan, TJ, Mayor, Caitlin, Elizabeth Dean, Jim McMahon, The Chief, Ernesto Castagna, Sedano 317, Deborah Hussey, 3 Fries Short, Kate Tip, Malcolm Reed, Sean Manning, and our 2 newest collective members, Congressional Baseball Fan and Chris Waterman.
Woo woo!
Nicely read.
Yeah, well
Yes.
done, MC.
Okay,
Well
I'm
done.
done for the evening, right?
You're done for the evening. Go
That's
home.
it.
See you later.
Bye.
Good night.
Just don't go any near airports that have Air Canada on them, and you'll be fine. So.
You're right to criticize us.
I am. We were trying to find out maybe if we knew what brand Eric's car was, so we could criticize that too and not get sponsored by them. So, also, guys, a big thanks to our executive producers, Commander Chris, Simon Stager, and the Chief, Ernesto Castagna. Oh, yeah, and we have a new one, which is just wild to me. I love our patrons so much. Chris Waterman, welcome as well. Y'all literally keep the lights on for us. So, cheers. Much appreciated. We have some very quick news. We're going to try and get right into this episode as quickly as possible. MC and Hawk, since you are the Canadian contingent, talk about Fan Expo.
It's okay. Fan Expo Canada is one of the biggest conventions in North America. I think it's the 3rd biggest one. And it is coming the last week of August. And it is a whole lot of fun. And we are going to be there as press. And we are planning some sort of live event. And we would super love everybody. We don't have all of the details put together yet because, just trying to recover from San Diego Comic-Con. But now we're going into full speed on it. And we will be having news come out shortly. And we would love you guys to come. Tickets are currently... basically they're just going to go up in price from now, so get them while you can. Get hotel rooms if you need them, because people come in for Fan Expo, so it's going to be quite busy. Should be a fun time.
Yeah, Toronto is a fun ass city to come party in, so if you can make it,
Yeah.
come on down.
It's true. I can confirm. I've been there twice, and I love it every single time I go. So, yeah, we have some fun stuff that we're trying to plan. We would love to see you guys there as well. And then postcards. I keep saying it. And I actually had them on my desk, and it was messy, so I moved them. But they are going out to you, and they're awesome, and they look really cool. And then I think I had one more thing that I didn't put on the outline, but I can't remember what it is. Yes, that too, MC. As you could see, I am wearing everybody gets to see how the sausage is made. There we go. Let me exit that out. I tried to do it on OBS. That's
Sorry.
embarrassing. It's okay. It's all right. This is what happens when I'm too lazy to do an overlay. Yeah, so Heroes and Villains, as you could see, another one of their awesome new shirts this evening. Thread the Needle, some Ortegas love, right? You get some Enterprise phaser action on an asteroid. The Enterprise on it is gorgeous. If you like this shirt, they just put on their socials a bunch of brand new ones that just dropped, I think, from like the past 2 episodes. So some crossover ones, I think some from episode 6. So they're awesome. And if you'd like to get one, 20% off your first order with our unique code, which is in all caps, STRANGE, heroesandvillains.com. I know a lot of people in our awesome collective have ordered already. If you don't want their shirts, they have like hoodies, and a lot of us on the pod are also baseball hats. A lot of us on the pod are also massive Star Wars fans, and their Star Wars gear is like, it gives me palpitations. It's really good. So 20% off your first order using our code STRANGE.
I think you mean palpitations.
That's what I was gonna say. Yes.
Because somehow he came back.
Get off my bridge.
I'll take it.
You should. You should. Unfortunately, that is U.S. only. Hopefully that expands at a later date. We are hoping to somehow work that out. But for now, that is unfortunately U.S. only. But get your shirts. They're awesome, and it helps us out as well. So should we get into the strange new loop? Yes. Good. Why did my button proc? There it is.
Hey.
It's the Cerritos. Things don't work. That's right, guys. Strange new loop time. So we had the premiere, which had Klingons and a little bit of Chapel and Benga backstory. I'm going to get rid of my mouse. Hold on. High tech here, guys, on Strange New Pod tonight. There we go. So we had that, and then obviously this one is also a major Klingon episode. A lot of people have wanted a deeper look into the Klingon War because we got it a little bit in Discovery, but I feel like not as much as I think fans wanted. So my question for you guys tonight is, after this episode, do you think that Strange New Worlds should keep picking up the pieces of the Klingon War, or after these two episodes that we've seen now this season, is that enough? And YouTube chat, let us know as well your thoughts. Who wants to go first?
I'll go.
Hey, if no, okay, go ahead,
We got some
guys.
eager people tonight. Ashlyn, go ahead.
Yeah, let's go. I think absolutely. I think that this is the biggest gap that we have between TOS and the next generation, and we have about 100 years of like history we don't know about the Klingons, or history that's been referenced but we haven't seen on screen. And I think there's a lot of rich history to dive into. And I think especially it's interesting to just see a perspective where there's uncertainty about the Klingons and the Federation. The war is over, certainly, but like in this episode, we're seeing how they deal with that. And I think it would be very exciting to see. So I'm all for, I'm biased from the Duras Sisters. I'm all for more Klingons in the future. I don't think this season necessarily, but next season, let's keep going.
Yeah, fair. Who wanted to go next? There were so many hands.
Rhianna, you can go.
Thank you. So yeah, I agree with Ashlyn a lot. I think that there is so much to unpack, even between Strange New Worlds and TOS. We know that there is animosity. We don't know how much, obviously. And then, of course, we get the movies that cover it, and then that TNG gap. So there is so much to discover. And I think like continuing to broaden the horizon of how we view Klingons is really important, because like this episode, we get sort of a two-tiered like opinion about like the Klingons during this episode throughout. And so that's always really interesting to look at. I think it's really important, to unpack, especially with Ortegas is sort of mentioning her like struggles with the Romulans when we saw that like future episode, and then this one with the Klingons, and just like how it impacts certain people is really interesting to me. And yeah, we already got such a rich backstory for Mbenga and Chapel a little bit in this one. So like, really, I feel like we can just keep doing more of that. But I'm a deep dives kind of person. So I feel like that also depends on how you like episodes. If you were like those kind of like deep insights into like Federation history, which I do, then I'm so for this. I think it's also because I love Deep Space Nine. And that's all, so much about war and about like the conflict. So I always find it really interesting for sure.
Yeah, agreed. Totally. Hawk, MC?
Ashlyn and Rhianna, I totally agree with you guys. Absolutely, we need to have some more Klingon episodes or episodes about the Klingon War, because while the Klingon War happened, we've moved into the Klingon Federation Cold War.
Yeah.
And if you look at their first appearance in Errand of Mercy, like they're on the brink of going to war again. So we're going to have this back and forth between the Federation and the Klingons up until we get the Khitomer Accords, which is still, 20, 30 years away at this point? Like there's a long... And even after that, when we get into Deep Space Nine, then we have, the problems... during the early days of the Dominion War, where the Klingons have been very hesitant allies, even going into the TNG era. So yes, absolutely. At this point, we're only 3 years out from the Klingon War.
It's not a long time. It's like 2 or 3. Yeah,
It's fresh.
Yeah.
Hawk.
Yeah, I'm just not sure how they could. Like going forward in Strange New Worlds and that. I mean, you'll have references for it and that, but I don't think we'll ever get a deep dive into the front lines like we did with this episode again. And it's like I don't know if we really need to get that involved again, because flashback episodes only work, so well. If you do too many of them, it's kind of a wasted endeavor. But definitely there's still a lot of fallout in that, as we've seen in this episode. The memory of it clings, no pun intended. It clings to people who have gone through it. So it's something that we'll come back to at some point in the following seasons. But I think as far as this season, we're done.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Eric Summers in the chat said only if they bring back Laurel, which is absolutely like my take. There's so many people over the years that have like clamored and been, I would say, pretty vocal about like Star Trek series does not always need to be from the Federation's point of view. And while I don't think that we'll ever get like a legit Klingon series, I think an episode of Strange New Worlds 1 does need to bring Laurel back. And I think, there are ways to show more of like how she kind of like made her rise and, kind of got back into the fold and got Ash into, onto Discovery. And, even if we don't get those stories, just like I want a Klingon War episode told from the Klingon point of view. And I love Ortegas to be involved in that, because even though we do get a little more so yet again, we still don't have all of the story. And you could tell that story from the Klingon point of view and still have her be in like a focus of that. So I would really like something like that next season. It is something that like I think people forget just how bad off the Federation is at this point in the timeline, right? Like millions and millions dead. The Klingons literally took Starbase 1. That's how close they were to Earth. Like Starfleet is reeling, and that's why that's why, people like Jim Kirk were fast tracked for command, so I think these are stories that should be told. Absolutely. I want
that
more.
episode you pitched, that's either for next season of Strange New Worlds or for the anthology series that they're definitely going to do, because they absolutely need to do the anthology series,
which was supposed to be Discovery, right? The anthology series was supposed to be Discovery, and then they made it Discovery.
But they should make one now.
No, they should. I completely agree with you. Yeah.
But that is a really good idea. Like for an episode next season that just kind of takes place on board a Klingon ship, kind of like Wedge does.
I was going to say, it's kind of like
exactly. Yeah.
Be amazing.
Yeah. Eric also says that one episode of Disco season 2 focusing on her was fantastic, to be honest. Yeah, no.
It was. Yeah.
Haven writes, we are as far away from the Klingon War as Nemesis was from the end of the Dominion War. That's true too. Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. So, anything else on the Strange Loop question? Good. We're getting right into this. We're moving right along. It is our review of episode 208 of Strange New Worlds, Under the Cloak of War. Our roundtable order tonight will go Ashlyn or Rhianna, whichever one of you guys can switch back and forth. And then Hawk, MC, Eric is on my list. He did not make it, followed by myself. So that is what we will do. We will start with the welcome aboard with what are they called? The bosun whistles as well. I love
bosun.
The bosun whistles. Thank you.
Bosun whistle.
I love it. I love that touch.
So
Dak'Rah, son of Raul, a Klingon known to have committed atrocities during the war, who later defected to the Federation and became an ambassador, beams aboard in a very uneasy Enterprise, right? There are definitely not all of the crew because they were away. And if you haven't read the Enterprise War, it's kind of the backstory of where Enterprise was. But some of them were transferred on and did fight in the Klingon War. Pike grants Dak'Rah's request for a tour, and they stop at sickbay where M'Benga has a panic attack right at the sight of Dak'Rah. Chapel is also affected by this. And we fast forward to the bridge, and Ortegas, right, it gets caught saying some less than flattering things about him, earning stern looks from Pike and Una. A lot to go off just before the credits even roll. What did we think about this kind of almost disastrous arrival, kind of a la the Undiscovered Country?
I was thinking about Undiscovered Country a little bit here. I really liked Raw at first. Like I was like, okay, this can be a really interesting take of having a defector come aboard. Get to see that there's not all Klingons who wanted war, that type of thing. And so it's really interesting then getting to hear the different perspectives of Ortegas versus Uhura, which like completely opposite spectrums of opinions about Raw. And I think really what makes this first part of the episode so good is the acting. Like everyone here is bringing their A game. As my girlfriend says, like their rent was due. Like they were getting that rent money. Like they were so good in this episode. And I think that helps a lot with the tension because I am but very much like an empathetic watcher. So I get embarrassed with the people. I like get really
Same.
invested. And so I was really feeling the tension with everybody on this scene, especially the bridge and sickbay scenes. And I'm seeing right in the beginning of the episode, they're showing us how polarizing Raw being on the ship is because we have the people who weren't in the war who have this sort of very Starfleet outlook of, well, he's good now, you know, well, he's changed, he's decided to go for peace instead of war. And then we have the people who are participating in the war and who were kind of forced to fight the Klingons for all of these years. And it's just completely different, their opinions about Raw. So I really enjoyed that. I think it was a great start to the episode, even though it has me cringing a little. It's like a good cringe, though. It's one of those where you're like, they did this so well that I'm feeling it so viscerally.
Yeah.
Great points, Rhianna. I really want to talk about Pike for a second because I thought it was good that he talked to M'Benga and Chapel and say, you know, hey, I understand what's going on. Like I know you've been through the war, and just checking to see, is it okay if you come to this captain's dinner? Which I don't think we've seen that kind of empathy in other like Star Trek captains before. This is we're having mental health is a little bit more involved in this show. And so I thought it was cool that Pike did that. I think he can't possibly understand everything that they've gone through because I think it's kind of insane for him to have actually asked that. And the fact that they say yes just tells me like they're like only doing it for Pike. And I think if he had maybe not asked them to join, or not like if they had declined and said, no, I can't do that, or if Pike had just said, hey, like take the night off, it's not that important, things might have gone a little bit more smoother. But I also understand what Starfleet is trying to say, like send a message, like we are friends with the Klingons and everything's fine, like let's put on a good show. So that really struck me. And I agree that what Rhianna said, where in general, we're past the point of everyone sees a Klingon and they're like, oh no, I'm so scared and like racist about Klingons in general. I thought it was really great to get a specific ambassador that was so complicated because it really showed all the fractures so well in Starfleet. So really strong start. I couldn't believe all this happened before the intro. It's like, right. Oh, whoa. Yeah.
Hawk?
This was quite the intro. There was a lot to unpack. It was really well edited, like in the beginning, as that edit you see as Pike is monologuing about it, the arrival of the ambassador and like all the peace accomplishments, like the treaties and everything that he's helped coordinate. But it's that edit between some of my crew members and that were away during the Klingon War and that, but then focuses on one. There are some who served in the Klingon War, and you can see like the difference in facial expressions at his arrival. I was blown away when I saw him arrive, and I was like, "That's Robert Wisdom."
Yeah.
Yeah.
As a major fan of The Wire and that, and his performance as Major Bunny Colvin was like, it's iconic. Also he was on the last couple seasons of Barry, and he was just fantastic in that. It's like one of the funniest things I've ever seen. But yeah, that panic attack that M'Benga was having was so viscerally performed by him, and that, especially that thing where he's just kind of tapping on his chest and that, like near his heart, and it's almost like he's trying to get his heart to start back up again. I've been there before, so
same.
Yeah.
MC.
Wow, there's so much to say. First of all, just to get this out of the way, I want to say everybody's performances in this episode was so good. Like everybody total A game. That being said, I can almost see the writer's room and the looks that just must have, like, the wide eyes when somebody came in and it's like, okay, so the Federation's going to do Operation Paperclip, and one of the people they're recruiting is Goebbels. And because that's exactly what's going on here. They're like, just a hardcore war criminal is being brought in to do peace. And I'm gonna have a lot to say in this episode about a lot of different aspects of it, like the panic attacks. Oh, I felt that in my soul. And I don't know how I feel about a lot of that. But this is probably the best point for me to mention Ortegas, because she does have that great discussion with Uhura at the beginning of the episode when they're on the bridge. I really think they should have gone more Ortegas on this.
They should have. They should.
I think they made a huge mistake not having Ortegas in the flashbacks. And I know some people might say, oh, then it's everybody knows each other. But the thing is, we already know that Ortegas and Chapel knew each other because Chapel was new to the ship when in the pilot. But they'd obviously known each other for a long time because of all of the stories about Ortegas being Chapel's wingman. So, like, I think very much could have been, you know, and it would have, we've already, of all of the characters, Ortegas is the one that we've had the most prejudicial view of. So it would have been really good to actually see why from her. Yeah. So.
Yeah, agreed.
And I did have I did have that same kind of reaction when you learned about, like, Ambassador Ra, that he was not only, you know, a general in the war and that, but he was also a defector, and that he was given an ambassadorship by Starfleet and that. And that was the one part I just could not compute.
Yep. Agreed. Mm-hmm. I want to go off what you said, MC, because Yummy on Pod brought up a great point in the chat. I would love if the more we got of her wasn't just she quips or is bigoted, because she is bigoted, right?
Yeah.
On the bridge, like the things she's saying, whether they're true or not, dudes on board, you have a job to do. Like, I would love that backstory. I would love to know what happened to her to make, I mean, like, listen, we know by the end of this episode why Chapel and Omega have all this PTSD, right? But we still don't really know, other than even Boimler in those old signs to be like, you're a war hero. But, like, why is she a war hero? What did she do? And I'd love to know that story. And I know everyone in our chat and, you know, like, listen, our friends at Open Pike Night, like, started the Ortegas movement. Like, you know, Ortegas, right? Like I said, make this an episode next season. Give us more Klingons and give us more Ortegas. For me, there's so much to unpack here, right? The panic attack hit me really hard. I have panic attacks like that. I have severe anxiety, severe depression, and I've been there, and I've been to the point where I've clutched my heart thinking I'm having a heart attack. And I've called my wife and be like, I think I'm having a heart attack. She's like, you need to calm down. You're not having a heart attack. You're having a panic attack. It's okay. And I felt that. And that was hard to watch on TV because I believe Silver Meadow Tavern, our friend Matt, who's one of the editors on Strange New World, mentioned this episode was edited by Dana, and I'm sorry if I mispronounced the name, Gasparine, who also edited The Elysian Kingdom, did an amazing job on this episode. The way that was shot and then edited and just directed, just like felt that, like MC said, like in my soul. So, but we get so many different missteps, right? That really hit. The Ortegas misstep, the sickbay misstep, the Ractigino misstep, right? And you see, like, you know, he's putting on this facade of I hate my people. Not all Klingons are brutality, but when he touches that hot Ractigino, you could almost see a hint of that flare up. And this was one of the most intense Star Trek cold opens in a really long time. So I thought they did a very good job. Yeah. Does anybody else have anything they want to touch on this before we move on?
I was just going to mention too the scene with the Ractigino. Like, is totally Ra's internalized like racism coming out, you know, when he's saying all this stuff about I can't like don't equate this to my like I'm not, you know, like essentially he's doesn't want to hear him being compared to other Klingons and being tied to that culture. And I think because he's so desperately trying to leave his past behind that he thinks this is the best way to do it, is to just like completely reject being a Klingon. And that's a way to do it, is to completely become the Federation ambassador, you know, but you also have to still be connected to Klingon culture in order to do that. And so that's the huge disconnect I'm seeing here with Ra, is that like there's clearly some internal battle going on here that we get from this cold open. And it's just amazing the way it's done.
If you think about it, like that totally goes with his whole self-loathing, because he did the last thing a Klingon is supposed to do, and that's run away from a battle. So the only way for him to justify it in his mind is to create this elaborate backstory and, you know, a turn against everything that he grew up with, you know, his entire culture, because they're obviously wrong. There's nothing wrong with him.
Yeah, right.
But that all and it's weird because it all began like as soon as he got on the ship, and that when it was addressed as Dak'Rah and that, and he's just Ra's just fine, and that, and then went on to comment about how Klingon names are just like impossible to pronounce. And then like that bit with Spock, because Spock was really interested in Klingon culture, and it's like somebody pointed out, it's like it's probably the seed that of
That's
Spock.
me,
And
that's
that,
me.
that air just Julian pointed out that this is the seed that probably germinated into what became in Undiscovered Country, and that how Spock was the one who allied with the Klingons to find them a new homeworld.
Yeah,
I thought the seed was planted by him getting drunk with them.
In the premiere,
that'll do
exactly.
it too.
We're starting to see a little bud now, but again, the guy was dismissive of his entire culture, and that.
And we know that, sorry Hawk, but we know, right, like how much Klingon names do mean, right, like saying the full name, and like to dismiss that even as someone who it was weird. It was definitely weird.
You could tell immediately there was something just off about him.
Yeah. Very jarring. I also just want to add real quick that I think Hawk brought up how kind of shocking it was to see that the Federation had made him an ambassador. I think it speaks to their desperation. What Julian was talking about how this time in Starfleet is like really crazy. But it also made me think about this Voyager episode where the doctor he goes to the holodeck and he creates another doctor who's like specialized in B'Elanna's or in Klingon physiology. And he, like, everyone on board is like very alienated because he killed so many people in the
He's a Cardassian.
He was Cardassian.
He's a Cardassian, and he experimented on Bajorans, and that's why he like knows all these techniques and why he's like,
and the Maquis.
And the Maquis. I can't remember if someone threw out the episode name, but that I was really thinking about that, because he, like, they look at what's he doing right now, and he's a professor. Like, he's just chilling in the Alpha Quadrant, living his life, like not suffering any consequences for anything he's done during the war. So this is not the first time Star Trek has done this, but this is early on. So maybe they were just looking at this ambassador and thinking, hey, that's a good idea. Like, these war criminals, we should give them a new life in the Federation. Like, how sketchy is that?
Yeah. Tara goes in the chat. Eric was probably going back to Ortegas, maybe flying bombing missions, I expect, or flying people to battle locations, kind of what we see how Chapel arrives. So, definitely interesting. Let's see it on TV,
Yeah, let's go. More tickets.
Let's go.
Let's move on to the Siege of Jagal, right? Because we get flashbacks. Like, we get to see the Klingon War and how absolutely brutal it is, right? It gives us our closest look at that since Discovery Season 1. We get the backstory of Chapel's posting, right, on Jagal, and how she meets M'Benga, right? And then also I have to just give a shout out, Clint Howard's in this episode. Just
how old is Clint Howard?
Oh my God. Literally has been in Star Trek since he was a kid.
Combs
he is.
Crown.
Yeah.
I saw somebody call him a slow burn Jeffrey Combs.
Yeah, slow burn Jeffrey Combs. Exactly.
Yeah,
perfect. Yep.
Yep. And then we see just how awful, right, the front lines of this war are, especially on Jagal, which I think everybody has described as being the worst front that there was during the war. And Chapel has to adapt to that setting and that surrounding, because it doesn't seem like she's seen something like that before. And then like things like the badly injured being stored in the transporter buffer, which is definitely an homage to Mbenga's story with his daughter, right, with Rukia.
Mhm.
Yeah, literally surgery being performed that harkens back to how surgery is done right now, right? Because they don't have a what they call it, an internal organs
Organ
regenerator.
regenerator.
yeah,
Mhm.
right. So they're literally opening people up like the old days. Bones would be horrified.
That's what I was gonna
Yeah,
say.
right, right.
What is this? The Dark Ages?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah.
But yeah, doing things like open heart surgery, tired soldiers asking Mbenga for stims, and what Protocol 12, which we'll talk about, obviously. He created this, and then even asking Mbenga to become the Ghost. We find out in this episode he had something like 90 confirmed kills during the war. You know, he's Black
Hand
Ops,
to
Special
hand.
Ops, yeah, hand to hand. Because the Klingons by Dak'Rah's order start killing civilians and children, and it's dark. What do we think about these? There's so much to unpack in these flashbacks, and then just like this in depth and brutal look at the front line.
Oh my gosh, I actually loved these in a weird way. I think this type of scene is completely new to the Star Trek formula. Like we rarely get in-depth flashbacks like this, especially some that are so brutal, so emotionally like pull you in so deeply. It's something like it's a scene that's going to stay in my head when I think of Strange New World season 2. I'm like, oh, I'm having flashbacks. Like it was such an interesting scene. And I thought about MASH actually, because Chapel, you know, she's head
yeah.
nurse. I was like, literally, she looks like Margaret Houlihan. Like, this is beautiful.
Totally.
Kind of those like scrapping by kind of vibes, like very like little to no technology to help them deal with these situations. And it's interesting to see how quickly, you know, we feel like Chapel because we're in this scene and thinking this is really brutal. You know, we're right in it, and we see Mbenga. He's like, as casualties are coming in, he's like, you go here, and he's used to it, and he's really calm. And I mean, I would expect nothing else, but I thought this was a really, really cool scene. And definitely very chilling, a very like tone setting scene, because it's very jarring once we go back to what's happening on the Enterprise. It's very good contrast.
Yeah, so true. Well said. I feel like too, at least for me, flashback episodes are my favorite tropes. Like I love a good flashback. I will write them all the time in my writing. And I think that if they're done well, then they're done like this, you know, and you get enough of the past and the present, and you can see how with like the traumatic events they're going through, how they're starting to blend together as they're seeing Ra again and all of this. And, you know, I'm really also thinking about MASH. I'm glad you brought it up, because there's an episode in, I think it's the beginning of season 4 when BJ first arrives. He's just like, not starry-eyed certainly, but he's just like ready, you know. He's like, okay, I got drafted, but like, oh well, I'm here in Korea, I'm gonna go do my best. And then Hawkeye comes along and is like, no, this place is hell, like get ready, it's awful. And like the first time he has to do surgery on the road, he's like throwing up, you know, because it's just this horrible experience. And I'm really reminded of Chapel here, and because she is also sort of got this like naivety almost, where you just have, because you're just coming into Starfleet to explore, like our cute little sweet guy said, you know, he just joined to explore, and so did like basically everyone else. This is not like an Archer's Enterprise time where they are fighting all of these big wars. They're not supposed to be, at least. And so when this war is starting and people are being thrown into it, we see that this innocence is sort of dying so quickly for people like Chapel. And we've seen it already died for Mbenga like over and over again, because he's so just like calm, like Ashlyn said, just very cool about everything. And like even the other guy says like, oh well, you'll get used to it, you know, just like the constant bombings and everything that's happening. And so I think it's really great that they start in the middle of the action here, because it doesn't give us a chance to breathe, you know, just like Chapel is not given that chance. It's very much like throw you in the deep end, hope that you swim kind of thing, you know. And so I think too, just from like a writer's perspective, I think it's like almost poetry, the way that they keep having the like incoming transport over and over again, because there's this like repetition, you know. It's kind of like the darker version of when Jenkinpog is like has his little flashback episode and she's like, oops, this thing's broken, fix it, oops, you know, over and over again. But this time it's like literally people are dying in this moment, and it has this like, there's something so important about repetition in media. Like if you're repeating something over and over again, like it's for a purpose, in poetry, if you're repeating the same line, like it's got to mean something. And so I think it's really well done here that it's kind of the constant throughout. It's just the casualties keep coming in through the transporter, and it's just sort of like a constant feedback loop for the both of them. It's just so well done.
Hawk.
Oh, nice.
No, you're good.
Yeah. I did like the economical direction that they took, in bringing us into like, the front line of like the worst part of the Klingon War, and that we kept ourselves kind of steady in the medical camp, and that, much like MASH, actually.
Yeah. Yep.
So it's good that it's amazing how they created the tension in that while staying in a place that's supposed to be kind of their sanctuary, right? Besides with everything going on around them, and that the noise, and that as the shuttle comes in, and that they're taking fire from like air turrets. As soon as they get on the ground, she learns like, the situation that they're in, is that they're under equipped without technology. And I just kept thinking in that, like, what we would think is as primitive medicine is to them, the medicine they're having to perform there is probably something they haven't had to do in like probably like 200-300 years, right? At this point, like I don't know, like even their medicine, I don't know if they even actually ever see inside a human body, right?
I have to say, you have to think that they do, right? Because they were trained to do it, right?
Yeah.
So it looks like Starfleet Medical is smart enough to be like, hey, this utopia is really nice, but one day you might not have these and have to do real surgery with real knives and, real tools. So
I also want to point out Tendi had to massage a human heart.
She did.
In the pilot episode of Lower Decks.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
I feel like there's some joke about like, oh, someone took a course about how to do stitches too. And
yeah,
I can't remember what show that's from.
You're right. Yeah.
Well, that was Ghost of Illyria. No, not Ghost of Illyria. No, it was Lift Us for Suffering Cannot Reach, right?
Yes.
I keep messing it up. Sorry. It was Memento Mori. That was the one. I just named like 3 different Strange New World episodes.
Rhianna and I are like,
very
yes,
good episodes.
That's right.
Memento Mori. Yeah.
It's a good point, because even back in Benga in season 1, and that it's like he actually made a comment about how important it is to know the basics, and that, especially because he does his own compounding of materials and that to make new medications, right?
Yep.
And then we see Joseph and Benga. It's like they're not even referring to him as doctor at this point. Was he even like a doctor at this point?
I think he was. I think he was.
Yeah.
He had to have been.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think he was the MD, on the base.
Okay,
Unless it was Clint Howard.
Clint Howard was the
Clint Howard. Clint Howard was in charge, right? But
Mhm.
as he said, Mbenga was doing most of the work.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. And this came about as a decision because, like, on his part, because he was a soldier, like, and apparently a very good soldier. But at some point, he had some sort of like a crisis of conscience, or maybe some sort of an epiphany that said, like, I can't do what I've been doing, and I have to do something else. Like, instead of taking life, I got to try and heal. And I kept kind of pondering that, because the place later on in the episode, as we realize that, he goes back on that. You make that kind of a decision, and that it's not lightly. In that, at some point, he had a moment of clarity.
Well, it's either everyone was going to die, and he goes with them and tries to get off planet, or he tries to do something about it and gives Chapel and the wounded and women and children a better chance of survival.
Oh yeah, but I'm talking about even the decision to, like, I'm not going to take life anymore. And right. The closest I could equate it was like back in Pulp Fiction, and that, like, with the when Jules witnesses the miracle, and it's like, I can't do this anymore.
Yep.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
MC.
Thank God we got Chapel plot that doesn't involve the search for cock. Sorry.
Beautiful.
Don't be sorry.
That was amazing.
That's hysterical.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, Oh, they must have watched so many Deep Space Nine episodes
So many.
before doing this one. Because I mean, like, this is nor the battle to the strong. This is the siege of AR-558. This has so much Deep Space Nine in it, and I like this. I like the flashbacks. Like Rhianna, I love a flashback. I love, fleshing out somebody's story by actually showing what happened to them. And seeing everything that happened, like, this is just brutal. You just, all of these people just, being teleported or transported and like with guts falling out. I made Haven drop their phone. Very proud of myself for that.
You earned it. You earned that one.
And Mbenga, this is somebody who at this point is the CMO of the flagship. So he is just like this super competent doctor. But this isn't what people are going to him for during the war. It's for this, this drug stim that
Protocol
he created.
12.
And it's so that he can go kill people, which just goes to show you just how, dangerous that drug is and how dangerous Mbenga is. And it was so intriguing because, I mean, we knew that Mbenga definitely had like a dark history, but I don't think we thought it was this dark. And I mean, certainly in this episode, we'll find out it goes even darker. But even this is just like, oh, geez, like, was not expecting this.
Yeah. So many people in the chat referring to the Siege of AR-558, right? 588. It's a great episode of DS9. People loving. I've seen all over the internet the love for MASH in this episode. I watched a lot of MASH when I was really young because I used to lay in bed with my grandmother and she watched it, but I'm not old enough to remember it. I have to go back and like binge it.
Yes, do it. My friend and I watch it every Sunday. It's like the greatest thing you can do with your time. Yeah.
I know. I totally flash back on that episode you mentioned and that about the BJ's first appearance and that because he was a total Boy Scout in his dress uniforms arriving in Korea.
Yeah.
And then by the end, and like remember Frank was Frank was so excited to get a hold of him and like kind of mold him into the surgeon that he wanted to have on the staff of that. But Hawkeye,
so good. Yeah.
I didn't know we were gonna get this. Like when he beamed up, like I thought this might just be like a ship in a bottle episode, right? Like we're just doing all this shit. We're gonna learn things through dialogue, and all of a sudden we're on Chagall, and I'm like, let's fucking go. Because I've been dying for more Klingon War content, and to have an episode like this to come from DS9, which is my favorite Trek series, like it is just a love letter and homage to DS9, and it was gory, it was scary, it was I know I've seen I don't want to speak for them because I'm not one. I do have friends who are. I know this episode hit hard and did a lot of things for veterans. It did a really good depiction of that. One thing I want to talk about with Mbenga, by the way, Babs put in like, I know it's already been said, but just like this cast deserves so much more recognition from award shows and stuff, and they don't get it, and it's a shame. Just put in a masterclass, and so did Jess Bush, to be fair. Ashlyn, you were talking about how I'm sorry, so many people like this calm, cool, collected Mbenga. And I thought that Chapel did a really good job because, right, she was like, yeah, I'll just get right to work. And he's like, no, you'll have time for that. Like, go watch a show or something. But then the transporters go off. And she does. She just goes right to work. And if she is, like, panicked, she's doing a really good job of keeping calm. And I thought they did a really good job showing that. I want to talk about Mbenga's dark history because we know during this time, Section 31 is really active. Right. Mm-hmm. And I've seen this theory and it's one that I agree with. I do think that it was Section 31 who tasked Mbenga with making Protocol 12. And I think his 90 kills were through Section 31 Black Ops missions. And again, I'd love to see that story. And then
you can see the drug, but not the kills personally.
But how else do you go doing like hand-to-hand combat kills? And I know it's possible, but like, I don't know. Wouldn't they want him roped in for that kind of stuff? And they're, they had what's his name on Kronos to recruit Giorgio right away, right? Like they're everywhere. So I don't know. I think that he did a lot for Section 31. That's actually maybe one of the reasons where he's like, I'm done with this shit, because Section 31 is shady and we are doing things, even though this is war, that aren't okay. And I'm gonna put my medical jacket back on. This is everything I'd wanted from a flashback episode. So I was really stoked. Trying to see if there's anything in the chat. Kay Quinn writes, I wish we had met this version of Chapel first and the Gotten the love story second. I think everyone agrees with that wholeheartedly. Yeah, but it was so great to see her in this setting and do medical work, like practice medicine, right? And tickle a heart, like just wild. I loved it.
It's like, given what we've had of Chapel and that through seasons 1 and 2, it's easy to forget that there is this extensive resume with her.
Yep. Anything else on some of these flashbacks? We'll get to more of them in a little bit. Good. Let's talk about that dinner that Ashlyn alluded to, right? Because Pike reluctantly asks M'Bengal, Chapel, and Ortegas to attend this captain's dinner that he's hosting for Dak'Rah. They agree because it's Pike asking, and even though it's not an order, it's apparently an order from Starfleet, which is really just like
shady as fuck.
Shady.
I don't understand. That's yeah, I can make a lot of comparisons. Anyway, things go well kind of at first, but it's boiling. It's getting to a boiling point. As you can imagine, it doesn't go well. Ortegas has words. Bringing up to Kuvma, which I thought was a really nice throwback to Disco Season 1, by the way, with Remain Klingon. And then Chapel leaves, and then M'Benga also uses that as an excuse, even though Pike sees him, like gripping his chair really hard. Being like, why don't you go check on them too? What do we think about the dinner, right? And what does it say for Pike, who we generally think is like a really thoughtful captain, right? To ask and not be understanding or empathetic of this PTSD that the portion of this crew has.
Yeah, a lot to unpack here. I think this might sound like blasphemous, but these last couple episodes, I have just not been vibing with Pike like at all. Like, I don't know if it's the writing or the choices they're making or Anson Mount. I can't pin it down, but I just feel like either you're not living up to your full potential or something is inhibiting him from like having a sort of deeper sense of empathy. I think he was like really cool during the Spock as a human shit show. But then after that, like, I was just like, why are you making these decisions? What's going on? Like, I, especially in this episode, was really disappointed in him because it seems as though the entire episode, he's so focused on making Ra feel comfortable that he forgets that, like, he has a whole crew who is completely uncomfortable with this and clearly showing it. Like, it's kind of clear that M'Benga was not there to help Ra in the beginning because he was having his panic attack, and like Chapel was the only one to sort of recognize that. Sure, that's fine, but Pike like looked over. He catches notice of this thing. He knows that these people who have been to the war and have seen these things are gonna have negative reactions. He heard Ortegas's comment, and I think he's a little bit hiding behind the Starfleet rules, or this is from really high up on Starfleet. I'm like, okay, and like, can a Starfleet admiral truly order someone to like re-traumatize themselves at a dinner? Like, I don't think that was the
admirals
order.
can,
like, the order was
right?
just
The admirals can though, but you're a captain on the outer reaches of space on a starship who doesn't ever have to report to the admiralty that those people showed up.
Exactly. And it wasn't like, go make them sit at this dinner. It was just make sure that the war vets like get along with him. It wasn't this sort of specific order. I think Pike just wanted it to sort of be ironed out. It's like, it's a good thought in theory, but again, he's sort of this like bright-eyed Boy Scout BJ style before he learns about the war. And I think that is just really like not good because obviously he doesn't have this perspective, but I think there's a lack of empathy there because like I don't have that perspective, but I absolutely empathize with Mbenga and Ortegas, even though she's being a little like hostile. I understand why, and I would not invite her to the dinner. Like, even if you're just going to invite Mbenga and Chapel, why would you invite Ortegas when you know that she's probably going to say something and you're trying to keep the peace so much? Like, what's happening? I don't understand what's happening with the writing if Pike is so preoccupied with like just trying to be captain that I don't know. I need some answers. So I want to hear what y'all have to say.
That's a great point that you just brought up about Ortegas especially, right? Because I think Yum Yum Pod just said the same thing in the chat. I'm just going to say it, but Pike should not have invited Erica. She could barely hold it together at the best of times. Because I would not have invited her after I heard, like I literally walked onto the bridge hearing her say those things. Whether she has a trauma or not, okay, I get it. Bad idea. She's not coming. Doesn't necessarily feel the same way about Mbenga and Chapel, but like, man, even Mbenga as like the CMO should have, seeing her pacing, should have been like, I was in the war with you. I get it. You're on medical leave until he's off the ship. Done. So yeah, weird move. Anyway, I just wanted to say that. Ashlyn?
Yeah, I think it leaves an even like more sour taste in my mouth considering everything that he did for number one, and like he was willing to go against like every Starfleet regulation, like one of the biggest ones, to hide the fact that she was an Illyrian, and like they did the whole trial. So he's sticking up for some people but not for others. And I know he's trying to manage Starfleet, but yeah, like Julian said, they're on the border of space. Like it's gonna be okay, you know. Yeah, again, like I said in the beginning, I'm glad he thought to ask, but it still would have gone so much smoother if he hadn't forced them to go. I thought I have to do a Spock shout out. We already talked about how he's just like the perfect ambassador. He's such a good diplomat. It's weird to see these scenes with him and Chapel in general, but I did think it was good that he saw her distress, and so to go and talk to the general or the ambassador and to change the subject was really good. And that's how we got the interesting discussion about the comparison between the Art of War and the Klingon text, which is something that, like, I'm a huge nerd. I wish that conversation hadn't just been like sound, like they turned the volume down and focused on something else. I was like, okay, I'm ready for this podcast I'm about to listen to with Spock and Ambassador Ra. Let's go. Let's talk about this.
And real quick, did you know the Art of War is actually required reading at Starfleet Academy? So
yeah, they talk about it a lot. They love
they do.
It's an interesting book. I've read it a couple of times. So
nice.
Yeah, so I thought it was good. Spock doesn't have a lot of situational awareness sometimes, but in this case, I guess he does. Yeah, interesting dinner. I can't stop thinking about Undiscovered Country because it's like the famous Klingon dinner. This is a lot less formal. Pike didn't put on a huge like cooking show for this. It seemed like they were all like kind of sitting awkwardly like around. It just led to, or it like gave more a feeling of unease. So interesting scene for sure.
Yeah, a lot of people thought this was a bit of another DS9 Easter egg because Pike made jambalaya, which is a Cisco specialty.
Yeah, for sure.
Yep.
For sure.
Yep. Hawk.
Yeah, this was a big failure on Pike's part, because I know he went to there for they're the excuse to get the spice. What would they call it? Tellurium.
It was Delton oregano, right? Or Delton parsley. Delton parsley.
Delton parsley.
I thought it might be weed, but it wasn't.
Yeah, give me some of that Delton parsley.
I was like,
when he mentioned about the poisonous effects of it, like in large doses, I thought that was kind of it turned out to be a bit of a red herring, but.
Oh yeah. Hey.
I thought it was foreshadowing. I was like, this general's dying, but I was wrong way.
Well, he is just not now.
Yeah.
So he really dropped the ball on this because he pretty much took like Mbenga at his word, which I know like as a friend you're supposed to do in that, but he really didn't have a good read on him as far as that, and yet. Like Ortegas, just before she went into the dining hall and that had a chat with Mbenga. And Mbenga was playing a lot of different roles in this episode. And that, it's like not just like, on the ground as like a healer and medic, soldier, whatever, and that, but it also like it's interesting that he's still like the mental health professional and that for the rest of the crew. Like every problem they had, they came to him to talk, and he was always a great source of comfort to them. And that he just seemed to know what they say, which contrasts so sharply with like him in this episode, and especially at the end, and that it, heal thyself first, right?
Yeah. Yep.
The dinner, yeah. Again, Ross just seemed off in that. Like, it's almost. Do you ever meet a person that just seems like too gregarious and just,
100%.
too entertaining?
Yeah.
And it's like you're hiding
Totally.
something. And that's the impression I got, especially just like when he's chopping it up there with everybody and that. And Uhura is like kind of laughing at his jokes and about the Tellarites.
That made me really uncomfortable when Uhura
Yeah.
laughed at his jokes. I was like,
Yeah.
yeah.
I know. It's like in when you think about it, Ortegas' reaction was like probably the only normal reaction at that table.
Really quickly, I'm just going off topic. I'm hearing thunder where I am. So if we get disconnected, we had a power outage yesterday. I'm really sorry. If we go out, we'll continue the show another day, or they'll try and get online somehow. I'm sorry. So just letting everybody know there's thunder. There might be thunderstorms. Apologies.
Okay.
MC.
Okay. I know we like to make jokes about how bad the Federation is about mental health, but my fucking God, like, this is beyond the pale. Actually, at this point, it's fucking insulting how badly they are treating mental health. Because as Hawk mentioned, Mbenga, like, in this time period, the CMO, it also functions as the counselor. So Mbenga is the one who is looking after the mental health of everybody on the ship. And he has massive PTSD that is apparently so bad that he's having like multiple serious anxiety attacks. So like, what the hell? Like, why aren't these people being taken care of? Why is it just, oh, you'll be fine. Like, just come have some jambalaya and talk to the guy that, ordered your deaths on this planet. Like, no, this is not the way we treat people. Like, this is like, even now, like, I mean, we're still not great with how we treat people with PTSD after the war, but I mean, we at least acknowledge it for the most part. And you would think by the 22nd century that or 23rd, whatever we're in at this point in Star Trek, that they would actually be like, yes, we acknowledge the fact that you have gone through this terrible trauma, and we're not going to re-traumatize you by putting you in the room with this guy and expecting you to play nice. Like, there's absolutely no reason for it. Like, they're delivering this ambassador to somewhere else, but he's not doing any ambassadorial duties on the Enterprise. This is just a glad-handing situation. So why the fuck is Pike insisting that the people that he knows specifically have been, deeply affected by this be in the room?
And this particular man in particular,
it's just
right?
it's disgusting. It's disgusting from Pike. Like, I really,
it's one of the
really
few times that we
judge him for
see
this.
him. Yeah, it's one of the very few times that we see Pike make a pretty disastrous decision, right?
Yeah.
Nobody's perfect. Pike is definitely referred to as the Boy Scout a lot. And this was definitely one of the rare times that he made a really bad judgment call, for sure. You guys said a lot of amazing things about this. I don't want to touch too much on this because you guys said it perfectly. I do want to touch on Spock and Chapel because we're not going to talk about it too much. And the fact that Spock was a petty bitch in this episode. I was everybody knows throughout the season I am a rare, they're not too many of them out there, Spock Chapel shipper. This episode finally got me off the train when he was like, oh, I just like, I want to be there for you, or like blah 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 blah, and he's not getting the point. And I'm like, dude, you need to fuck off. Like, you just need to go away. This is so petty. This is so bad. Like, stop. Like, this is about her right now, not about you. I think
his exact line was, "You need time away from me."
Yeah, and I'm just like, dude, he's like, this is not ninth grade. Like,
that's how it felt. Yeah.
Come on. I'm off Spapple. Goodbye. The last thing I want to touch on, because we're not going to talk about it that much either, just because of like everything else that happened in this episode. Thank God for Una in this episode, right? Yeah. Who does read the ship and, in a rare occurrence, is the one to be like, we need to change course. I don't know how you're not seeing it, Chris, but this crew is mentally fucked up right now. And I think Pike even tries to question her, but she's like, no, like, it's not okay. Like, our crew is hurting and we need to go. And he listen, you know, a point down for him, but also a point up for trusting in his first officer, accepting the course change. I thought that was a really good move. I don't know if anybody else wants to touch on those subjects before we move on real quick. Good.
Spock seriously sucks. Like, I know we said we weren't going to talk about it much in this episode, but like, I liked that in this episode that he was playing more of like the supporting role to Chapel, but he was such a little dramatic bitch in this. And like, I just cannot, like, with this, like, what the fuck, Spock. And Una, I'm really angry that we're not getting more Una this season. Like, we had like that really good second episode, and it does feel like we've gone back to the Una's kind of fading into the background. And even this, like, she had that really good scene, but it was kind of just that really good scene. And I want more Una. Yeah. Just give her to me because she's so good.
Yeah.
Yep. Fair. Let's see. K Quinn, women taking breaks from Spock set him off, I guess. Ooh, yeah, good point. Good point. But he asked her for time post Hemmer's funeral, so he knows the concept of asking for space. So yeah, it goes both ways, buddy. Yeah. Like, come on.
Exactly.
Come on. Yep. Let's talk about the butcher of Jagal. Throughout the episode, either from Ortega's bad feelings, which, let's face it, she may have not like been the best in this episode, but she knows her gut, and her gut was right. Like, you know, obviously things that she heard too, or also information given to us during the flashbacks, and M'Benga Dak'Rah's sparring session as well. We hear how Dak'Rah committed all of these atrocities, right? Ordering his own people killed, killing civilians. And it did all turn out to be true, right? Like, Dak'Rah is the epitome of a coward, right? Like, he is just the worst. He also, you know, escaped off-world while his men died for him, basically, which is like the most un-Klingon thing that you could possibly do. But it was also M'Benga who was the butcher, though that's more of a mental, like, I'm the butcher because I went and killed all these Klingons. Whether he was actually the butcher or not is, you know, up for debate. But he does. He after seeing these innocents killed, right, including children, civilians, comrades, people he literally just did surgery on, right? He goes dark and hunts down Dak'Rah. He as he says, he finishes the mission, and butchers Dak'Rah's men in the process in a very graphic flashback scene. What did we think about M'Benga going and finishing the mission?
Ooh, okay, well,
go ahead, Rhianna.
thanks. No, I want to talk first about the sparring session, about the this really like highly charged scene. I thought some blades were going to be thrown earlier, to be honest.
I thought a batleth was going to be grabbed off the wall. Yep. Yeah,
no, totally. But I couldn't help but think about Conscience of the King in the original series, because this is Kirk facing Kodos the same way that M'Benga is facing Ra. And so I think it's really interesting because it has like a very similar feel to me to when Kirk is like playing the literal tapes that Kodos said, and like, here's your whole speech, dude. Like, this is exactly your voice pattern, that kind of thing. He's kind of asking him these leading questions. And so I thought it was so cool that then M'Benga is asking, like, who fought back the hardest, you know, like kind of asking these leading questions of like, what an odd thing to ask, you know, like out of context, it seems very random, but like, especially I watched this episode twice today. So on my second viewing, I was like, oh, okay. Like, this makes a lot more sense of why he's asking these questions. And same when you rewatch Conscience of the King, you're like, okay, Kirk obviously knows this is Kodos, but like, he's seeing how much Kodos is willing to give, how much of that morality is left, if at all. And so I think that's really interesting. It's sort of a like, are you going to tell the truth to me right now? Like, is this going to be a moment where you come clean and say you were a coward, Ra? Or are you just going to continue to say, oh yeah, I fought them all, I killed them, I made my choices, now let's live in the moment, let's live in peace, you know? Like, Kodos kind of had the same mentality, which is just terrifying. And so I really thought that was an interesting like take that they did. And of course, there's so many episodes that this episode is talking about in Trek, because Star Trek does Star Trek, you know, in the best ways. We get to see these over and over again. But yeah, as far as like M'Benga sort of being the butcher and having these innocents killed and everything, like, I think for me, I see it as very much M'Benga being pushed in all these directions with barely any autonomy. The entire time that we're seeing this episode, Chapel's the only one who gives him space, gives him like moments to choose. Pike doesn't give him a choice, really. The Andorian we see in the flashbacks gives him basically no choice, like guilt trips him into it. It's clear they have a history with whatever assignments he might have sent him on. We also see that Ra is giving him no choice during these moments, their little sparring session, and then the final scene. And so I think that I really hate to see how like Ra keeps throwing Jagal in M'Benga's face, you know, and keeps sort of bringing this up and pushing M'Benga. And I feel so deeply for him because he has so little autonomy in these moments. And especially with all of this stuff being brought up again, all of his PTSD being completely like flaring up again, you can see that this is just another moment where he's feeling trapped. He's feeling like, am I going to have to do this all over again? Like, am I going to have to revert to how I was during the war when I had no autonomy? I had no freedom really to choose where I go, what I do, who I kill or don't kill, you know, kind of thing. And it's so complicated. And I think the way they did the flashback scenes were really, of course, like graphic, but also really amazing in a way, like really well done. I think it's so important, you know, in a way, like if you're not doing violence for violence sake, you know, if you're doing it for a purpose, which they are here, I think it's important to add in. So yeah, lots of thoughts, but this is definitely, it just hits really hard for me because I see that lack of autonomy that M'Benga has. And as much as we all want to like maybe blame him or obviously like, yeah, he did terrible things, but also like war changes people, like he said, you know, and he didn't want to be changed, but of course you're going to be. Like all of this stuff is going to change you.
What about the people he murdered? What
murder?
It's fine.
Yeah. Yeah, like I love him, and yeah, it's just very interesting. So
yeah.
Thank you, Rhianna. Yeah, I didn't even think about that. I mean, M'Benga like did have a choice. He could have not chosen to spar. And even Ra says, I'm surprised you showed up. I'm surprised you showed up too. I couldn't believe that.
True.
Yeah. I think like what Hawk was saying, it was kind of a red herring, just like with the, you know, toxic dose of the weed that Pike was getting. The parsley. Yeah. Yeah, I thought it was another red herring. I also thought, I saw this on Twitter afterward, that during the sparring session, they're wearing those red outfits. It's similar to what Kirk and Charlie X wear in the episode.
Yeah.
And I was like, that level of reference is almost beyond me. I was very impressed by that. Yeah, okay. So with Ra, Rhianna, it's amazing how we're related, because I was actually thinking, in regards to the dinner scene, this would be like asking Kirk to have dinner with Kodos, like see how he does in this situation. Same thing with M'Benga and Ra. And you know, we were talking about how Ra is like kind of gross, you know, he's like just talking about peace and you just don't trust him. I couldn't help but think about Gul Dukat in his like I'm a cult leader era, you know, where he seems very like peace and love, and I understand the world now and I understand my sins and what's wrong with me.
It's also the scariest Dukat.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. When very he's the most unhinged, and yeah. So I couldn't help but think about that. It's not quite that level because we haven't seen it. We do get this visceral flashback, seeing about all the children dying, but we don't actually see Ra like giving those orders in the flashback. So I have a little bit of problems, or I have a little problem connecting with like how bad the atrocities were. But again, the flashback, I think, does enough of a job to get you there. Yeah, I don't know. I think it kind of goes back to what we were talking about in the beginning, where Ra hates Klingon culture and he is a coward, we know. And so I think he's trying to justify like, well, I hate Klingon culture. I don't subscribe to it because what I did was not Klingon and it's something that I'm ashamed of. So if I don't believe in it, then I'm absolved of sin. So it's fine. Yeah, I thought all of this was just beautifully written, great performances. And I also wanted to note that I read an article on Cinema Blend that has a little interview with the director.
Oh, from Mick Jost?
Jeffrey Bird. Yeah.
He's a good friend. That's a great article.
Yeah. And I just
So
to
good.
talk about the end of your question about like the actual like murder that we see behind the frosted glass, like they apparently shot multiple versions of that, and they didn't know which one was going to be the winner, you know, but they ended up going with Behind the Glass because it was the most like it leaves it up to the imagination almost, and you get these conflicting answers with what Chapel's saying. So I just thought that was interesting that he even considered making like multiple versions of the end of this episode.
Yeah, agreed. Before we move on, Michael Kwan has a point, and I think in order to keep going with the discussion, we have to make clear, because I think I may have screwed it up too, and it's true. The Butcher of Jagal name was not because of the crimes against civilians on Jagal. It was the name given by the Klingons to the killer of the three ranking Klingon officers that were guarding Dak'Rah. So
Yeah.
just want to make that clear. Were you good, Ashlyn?
Yeah.
Hawk.
So yeah, I'd like to talk about the sparring scene because that really stood out to me. And was kind of like one of the first indicators that something was definitely very wrong with on Mbenga's part, because it wasn't the fact that he agreed to it at all, and that especially after the dinner and that, and the way Raw kept reaching out to him and like, you know, just stopped him on the way out, you know, it almost very intrusively, you know, going back to like, you know, how nobody would give him agency or autonomy. But the sparring session was uncomfortable in the fact that like Mbenga was participating only in it, but really holding back and almost like he was measuring him up.
He absolutely was.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, several times letting himself get bested and put to the ground by Raw. It was almost like he was trying to there was that point where it's like when he was on the ground, Raw was standing over him, and that it's like you could almost see like a flash of like the real person behind the mask and that coming out there. But in Mbenga, like he played that like he was really kind of working out like, you know, how good is this guy as a fighter, right? And I keep thinking towards the end, because when we actually get to the end, but he went in there with an agenda. You know, obviously Raw did too in that, because like the insistence and like trying to like recruit him to his side and that to be some sort of an ally and that in his campaign as a, you know, an ambassador and a new man of peace, you know, and basically using this guy he traumatized to, you know, accomplish his goal. But it was really uncomfortable for me watching this with Mbenga and that, because part of me knew like he had a plan there. He was you know, prodding him for information, testing out his fighting skills and that, and seeing where his weak points were. Like that's what I garnered from that sparring session. Sorry. What else? Oh, sorry.
Well, him going to making the decision, right, to go and finish the mission.
Yeah, exactly. Which kind of makes me wonder. I know like he does suffer from PTSD in that. But was that decision towards the end more about, you know, an effect of the PTSD, or is it just pure vengeance he was after?
I don't think it had anything to do with pure vengeance. I think that he saw civilians and children get killed, people he just worked on, and the Klingons had the base, right? Like they were going to destroy it. They were basically going to glass Jagal. Everybody was going to die. Pretty much Chapel, everybody that was there were not going to make it unless someone did something about it. And I think he did what needed to be done.
Yeah, and Chapel spurred him on. That's for sure.
Mhm.
Yeah.
She didn't hold him back. Yeah.
Yeah. I think I'm not going to say that there's absolutely zero revenge in there. There certainly is. Like you do open heart surgery, you have that conversation with that kid, and then you see him die. Yeah. Like I'm maybe going to want some revenge too. But I think as someone who cherishes life, he knew everybody was going to die unless he killed Dak'Rah, right? Who obviously was a coward and fled. But he did what needed to be done. Sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I think I'm good.
MC?
I'm going to bring up the siege of AR-558 again. These were, and specifically, we have Quark, talking about, the the Federation officers and basically what they turn into. And we have that one officer in it who's collecting the Ketracel White. So, basically like doing like the whole human ear thing, but, with things from the Jem'Hadar. And I think that Mbenga has elements of this through being stuck on Jagal for just, this extended period of time and seeing, all of these people that he is working on being killed. So I think it's part vengeance, part just like desperation. I don't think you can say that it is one thing.
Yeah,
I
fair.
think that it is a lot of different things. I mean, like, we're gonna, I think, get a little bit more into it. That being said, I'm not the biggest fan of the reveal. Like, I'm trying to justify. I'm actually not a fan of the reveal at all. I'm trying to justify it in universe because it's like this is what they've presented to us, but I don't love that this is the way that they decided to go in this episode.
Especially when they kind of like when he was setting off to do the mission on that, it's kind of like it seemed like they were directing him more like as an action hero or John Rambo or somebody, right? And it's just like it was not a good look for it.
Yeah, and in terms the sparring session, I think I agree with Hawk in that there's a lot of sizing up going on there. And I find this very interesting, like the dynamic between Ra and Mbenga. And I've kind of summed it up with 2 quotes from the original series. Ra is all in a different reality. I could have called you friend. And Mbenga is from Hell's Heart. I stab at thee.
Love that.
Perfect.
But yeah, through the sparring session, Mbenga is trying to figure out like what is going on with this guy, which is why, and I've been debating with Julian about this for days at this point. I'm pretty sure that accidental kill was not only murder but kind of premeditated.
We're gonna get there.
Yeah.
Before I give my thoughts, because I'll talk about it more when we talk about this next point, because I think we do need to bring it up. I want to mention Jeffrey Beard, who is the director of this episode, also a protege of Spike Lee's. He's worked on a lot of racially charged films, right? We're talking about how this maybe didn't paint Mbenga in the best light, right? There's definitely an argument that this episode suffers from the scary, angry black man trope, right? What do we think about that, given the nature of this episode?
You want to go first, Ashlyn?
Oh, I don't know. I kind of felt like you're talking about the John Rambo feel. I really saw Mbenga as they were trying to paint him as an action hero, and I kind of thought, I was like, wow, that's kind of badass that he was able to do that and like save everybody. I didn't have any thoughts about this could possibly be a controversial move that they made until later. I'm seeing the reactions. So for me, I really have enjoyed seeing Mbenga's journey throughout this season. I loved seeing him in episode 1. I love that they're bringing back this side of him now to really get more depth. So to me, it's and seeing that he's probably being manipulated by Section 31, I feel like this is the move for him. So I don't know.
Yeah, fair. Rhianna?
Yeah, I think it's so hard as a white person, to have a great perspective on this, but I do think that maybe also this is why we should have had more Ortegas, because it didn't have to just be sort of we have the red shirt guy who is a person of color, we have Mbenga, we have Ra, we have a lot of Black people who are injuring each other, and there's a lot of Black on Black violence, which I don't love. And so I think if Ortegas could have had a bigger role, if we could have brought in just more of the crew to maybe even more Chapel had a great role in this. I think that obviously she didn't go through what Mbenga went through.
Right.
They have different types of trauma and stuff, but my partner did say. She was like, this is like, I didn't see it as being that controversial, but also like all of the Black people definitely moved the action of the story, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but in this context, it can be, and I
Right.
think that they're really towing this line. This is also Star Trek. We've made a lot of decisions like this. I mean, I don't know how Far Beyond the Stars was received when it came out, like I'm sure that there's been episodes like this that people are like, you went too far, you did this or that, and this is kind of Star Trek pushing the envelope as they tend to do, which I think is always better to try and to make these points and to talk about tough things than just every episode being a musical episode or a crossover. I mean, that's the beauty of Star Trek, is that you can have these really in-depth episodes that challenge you a little bit, and I don't see that as a big problem. But again, I'm a white person,
Yeah.
so like I don't have much authority in this matter.
Yep. Huck?
Like it's important to remember that the perceptions matter in that, and we're talking about like one of only a handful of people of color who are cast members on the show, and that what happened is it leaves a lasting impression not only on like the character and that and going forward and that, but our perceptions of him. And we are dealing with like a perception that can make a simple traffic stop or detainment on the street, like for an African American or a person of color, and that turn deadly at any moment, and it's that perception or preconception is that Black men can't control their tempers, and the Mbenga I remember from season 1 was not that person. Not in season 2, and like everything they've talked about with the Klingon War seems to kind of push that perception too much, and I don't like it because he's this legacy character, and it's like we're going, we have to live with him for the next several seasons going forward, and I think it's damaging. I don't think it's a good look for this character, especially considering that like everything I've seen in it points to that he murdered Ra. I honestly believe that.
Okay. MC?
So, and I think this is, kind of what, Hawk was touching on. When it comes to something like Star Trek, I think like, okay, definitely when I was watching this episode, like I was picking up on it was making me uncomfortable seeing Mbenga in just these viscerally violent, like more violent than we've ever seen on Strange New Worlds before. And I think in most Star Trek, this was one of the most violent scenes of him being the butcher. And that's something very jarring. And this is like one of the only Black characters that we have in Strange New Worlds. And I mean, yes, we have Jeffrey Bird directing it, and he's a protege of Spike Lee's. And Spike Lee certainly has done, racially charged stuff in his movies, but also that's a very, Black cast. And if you look at,
True.
The movies that Jeffrey Bird has done, also very Black cast. So, that kind of information hits a lot differently. Also, something that I haven't brought up because it actually just, shot right through my brain. Everything that's going on with Mbenga is very reminiscent of, the Black soldiers who were experimented on. And, that's talked about in, what is it? Falcon and the Winter Soldier, or alluded to. But the problem is, they kind of like, you can like see it out of the corner of your eye, but it's not like they actually address it. It's not like it's, framed as being a bad thing. In fact, everything is put onto Mbenga in this. So, it's, it was Mbenga who did this. It's, not every, while it is, war is bad, it makes you think, but it's not, I'm not sold in how it was framed. I feel like it was a disservice to the character, and I didn't really like it. I think that they could have done something more interesting with it.
Yeah.
You know what would have definitely served the story better is if this tale of revenge was given to more of a cutout or a one-off character, like, keep the Mbenga in story, in focus and that, but like to put him in with the killing at the end, it could have been the same story could have been better served if they had had a one-off who was actually responsible for the murder at the end.
I had actually wondered, like, what if they had done this episode and they had like one of those other people like hurt Ra, and then Mbenga has to treat him.
Yeah.
I know that they were talking about last night on Discovery Pod, like what you were saying, Hawk, like maybe a background character, or Mariah, I think, even suggested, what if this was Chapel, like doing this too, right? Which would have been interesting. I got to go kind of with what Ashlyn was saying and a little bit of what Rhianna was saying too. Like, I'm a white man. I'm a privileged white man. So I don't pick up on it. I did not see it. I understand how it could definitely be taken that way, but I did look at him as, an action hero, and more, not even an action hero, just this being a story about what war does to people. And that was the one thing I had throughout my mind the entire time watching it, both times. And after the episode was over, speaking about it with my wife, like that this is just like, war, makes you do really desperate things at really desperate times. And I think it's actually a really unique take for Mbenga, and a unique, development with his story. Because I do think that, yeah, okay, it's definitely revenge fueled, but it's also we're talking about saving lives. He is a doctor, and he is saving lives by going to kill these Klingons, right? Because if someone does it, because everybody else was dead, all the soldiers were dead. If he doesn't do this, they're all dead. And I keep going back to that point. And then as far as the murder, I go back to what Ashlyn was saying about the Cinema Blend article. This could be taken a few different ways. Like, Hawk thinks it's murder. I think MC thinks it's murder. I don't think it was murder. I think it was self-defense. I think no matter what, does Mbenga want this guy dead? Sure, and we're going to talk. You know what? Actually, let's just get into it, right?
Yeah.
Because let's do it. The episode concludes, right, with Dak'Rah wanting to speak with Mbenga. He walks into his sickbay. He tells the Klingon repeatedly to leave and to leave him alone. And instead, Dak'Rah continues to try and convince Mbenga to see his points of view. And even though Mbenga is calling out all of the horrid things that he did, and he's like, you're playing a saint, even though you're a coward. He's like, people need saints. And at one point, Dak'Rah puts his hands on Mbenga, leading to the two fighting. And ultimately, Mbenga does stab and kill Dak'Rah. I personally think it's self-defense. We're obviously going to have a conversation about that. Chapel tells Pike that she saw the whole thing, which isn't entirely true. Whether we know that or not, that was also in the article. We don't quite know if she did see the whole thing or not. Then leading to a really powerful conversation between Pike and Mbenga. Thoughts on the conclusion, guys?
Anna, you're up.
Yeah, okay. Also, if you can hear my cat Upton, he wants dinner and he's going to be going.
Aww.
We are a pet-friendly show.
He's pretty mad at me. Oh man, this is such an interesting way to end this episode. I think a couple of quotes I want to pull out here. First of all, like you said, Julian, using the blood on my hands to make yourself a saint. And Ra says people need saints. He's sort of building up this wall of lies, and that he's constructed so beautifully for Starfleet to fall right into, and the Federation. I mean, literally, Mbenga calls out the Federation, and he said, I knew the diplomatic corps knew who he was and still let him represent the Federation, And so as I'm watching this scene unfold and watching Mbenga repeatedly say, please leave, please. At one point, he uses his begging hands. He goes like this. And I think in a way, like if Mbenga were Chapel or a woman or something, like absolutely I would have thought, like there would have been no question in a lot of our minds if this was self-defense, because if a man put his hands on me, I'm pulling a knife. Like, I don't care if he just touched my shoulder while I'm telling him to leave, while repeatedly begging And so I think the fact that like, Mbenga, he's a strong man, he can handle himself kind of thing, still doesn't negate the fact that Ra put his hands on him and like there was something happening where he was showing aggression, and Mbenga, I think, who is already in a triggered state, already having these flashbacks throughout the entire episode to what he did in the past, is sort of like almost reverting, like you are attacking me, so I'm going to defend myself. And I really think that like I can't see a lot of fault in this. Loki, my girlfriend and I were like, yeah, stab him. Let's go. Like, we want to see this dude dead, and obviously that's the whole crux of the story, like with Pike's conversation afterwards. But, I think that both of them bring up great points. And it's sort of, again, what we were talking about at the beginning of this sort of Starfleet happy-go-lucky view versus the like wartime Klingon front view, because they're so different. And Pike really wants to believe in the best of the best and think that all of his officers are always going to be Federation first, that they're always going to be leading with the Federation like tenets in mind. But not when you see someone like Ra, I mean, this is someone who will bring out the worst in people, and it's bringing out the worst in Mbenga, it's bringing out the worst in Chapel, like Ortegas, everyone who he comes in contact with, who they know what he's done and know that they could never forgive personally. Like Una said, they're all on their own journey, and they're all not going to act like Starfleet right now. And so I just think it's insane that like no one was looking out for maybe Ra trying to come up and confront Mbenga, first of all. Like, the thing that pisses me off almost more than Pike ordering Mbenga basically to dinner is the fact that when he hears that Mbenga was attacked, was self-defense, the first thing he says when he comes to see him is, "Oh, La'an's filing a report." I'm like, if my bestie was getting attacked and killed someone in self-defense, I'd come running and be like, "Are you okay? What do you need? I'm giving you leave. Let's like go to your quarters. Let's get out of this space. Like, what do you need?" Not, "La'an's filing a report. Let's talk about ethics for about 10 minutes. Like, seriously, it's the wrong time. It's so
unfortunately they're
unprofessional.
military. They're military. They've
Yeah.
gotta do
Whether
it that
people
way.
want to
They're
say
like-
Starfleet's not a military or not, they're military, right?
It definitely is. Yeah.
Can I just touch on what
Yeah.
you're saying real quick, Rhianna? Because
Yeah,
it's a
go
great
ahead.
point too. Like, so many different mistakes are made here, right? And I'm not saying this of like he's a dangerous man, he should have a security detail. It's Star Trek tradition and history. Like, every single episode of Star Trek we've ever seen, when an enemy race is on board the ship, that they have a security detail, right? Like,
Mhm.
why is Dak'Rah being allowed to just roam the ship and walk into sickbay of someone who is like obviously not a fan of this guy? Like, mistakes kind of made all around by command at the highest level command on the ship. Like,
Yeah.
So what you're saying is he needed to have the staff of Ra?
Yes.
Ooh, give her the button.
I am.
Just shut up.
Or, you know.
That was
Are you
so good.
You kidding me?
It deserves both.
It does.
Yeah.
You do raise a good point, like about that. Like, why wasn't he more watched than that? Like, defectors
Yeah.
in general are not, they're not treated like, the celebrity that like Raw is, and that like there was a series recently in that called The Spy Among Friends, and that dealt with a real life defector, Kim Philby. He was a British spy, but who was also like spying for the Soviets on his own people, and that. And he ended up like, when he was found out, he went to Russia to live, and that, his life there was basically constant surveillance.
Yeah.
They took care of him.
Wow.
They gave him everything and that, but they also had like, they had somebody live in with him and that. His phone calls and everything were surveilled and that. They're not people who are, defectors are not trusted, by the people who they defect to, or by anybody else at that point.
Also,
Yeah, let
just
alone made
remember-
ambassadors. Yeah.
Remember La'an and Mbenga were the ones sparring together, so why isn't she just like a natural part of these sparring sessions?
Yeah.
Like as a neutral party, as someone who can kind of watch the murders.
That's the
and-
security officer?
Yeah. the
Yeah.
So
literally
many,
like,
like,
how easy would this have been to put
failures.
her?
So many
in the story?
errors in this game. Yeah. Yes.
Ashlyn, do you want
Yeah,
to continue?
exactly.
Oh, sorry, Rhianna, were you
Alright.
done? I'm sorry.
I was just gonna say this one quote that Mbenga says to Pike. He says, "You have the privilege of believing what's best in people," and I think that's the like the thesis sort of this episode is that difference between the Starfleet people and the people who've been in the war.
Yeah.
Oh, I love what everybody's saying. I think I just have to bring up again the importance of Mbenga saying like, leave me alone, stop, no. And I think in his mind, he genuinely believes like that is Ra's version of starting the fight, is by not letting him leave. Like that is, it's seen as the first strike against him. But I want to bring up that he literally brought the knife that he used to murder the other generals, like to this journey. Like he literally brought the knife in with him. So like, what is going on? Why, if you didn't have the, and like, I get, okay, let me back up. There's so many thoughts are flying through me. If you know that you're going to feel threatened in the presence of someone, I would bring a phaser, you know, as a Starfleet officer. Maybe, is that too hostile? I don't know. Would that set him off? Ask like a neutral party to be there. But the fact that he brought the knife that he used to commit those murders is a little sketchy. And I know he's going through, like, he's revisiting all of this past and all of this trauma. But I thought it really hammered home when they're doing the like blood analysis on the knife. And it's kind of poetic that all four of those, him, Ra, and then all of his people below him, like all their blood is on that knife. I don't know how I feel about it. I don't know what Mbenga was thinking, like bringing that to the fight. The Mek'leth, right? Trying to make sure I'm a good Klingon.
I forget the name of that dagger.
Yeah,
that's not a Mek'leth. What Worf carries is a Mek'leth. I forget what the one that clicks from the Search for Spock.
Hey,
I forget
Ben.
the name of it.
Hey,
to
Ben.
be fair, he didn't bring it to the fight.
It's a
It was in
Tog.
sick. It's
it was in sick bay.
It was in sick bay. Like
that's true.
Yeah.
He didn't.
It was that
case.
there, right? Yeah.
His little case of horrors from that. From
horrors
Jagal,
trophies. I mean, I just real quick to counterpoint that, like.
Yeah.
So many Starfleet officers, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, is obviously debatable. Like Shaw had like a bunch of daggers, right? Like in his quarters. Like who knows where the fuck those are from? Like whether it's fucked up or not, like people collect trophies, and whether it's a reminder of the bad shit he did, or if it was a trophy, or he did actually plan on killing Dak'Rah at some point. Yeah.
Yeah, Lorca has all those weapons.
Fucking Lorca, man.
Loves his weapons.
Yes,
yeah.
he does.
Yeah. And then my thoughts about the Pike scene, I don't know, agree, like so many missteps. I also kind of think Pike is, you know, he references like how long they've known each other. But clearly he just has no idea like what Mbenga is going through this whole time. And I think under the guise of this, like, oh, the report is being filed, like under the like military-esque things he has to do. I think he is genuinely like shocked that Mbenga could ever possibly commit this kind of murder. And I think he's making sure like, oh, you know, like the things you did during the war are excused because it was in the war. You know, we have veterans on this ship. We know that people had to kill others in service of the Federation, but also the stuff that happens on my own ship is a concern to me. And I also couldn't help but thinking like if this had happened on Picard's ship, like this would be an absolute catastrophe. I know it's a completely different time, but I'm even thinking like the wave that this kind of news would generate throughout the Federation would be shocking. I can't believe that they are able to kind of throw it under the rug. I guess it perpetuates like, well, Klingons are murdery, so of course there was a murder. Like no one's second guessing it, I guess. Julian, we're gonna say something.
Yeah, sorry. 2 points actually that got brought up in the chat earlier. One, Haven brought up that speaking of throwing it under the rug, what was it? It was I totally lost my train of thought. Ashlyn, keep going because I'll come back to it and I'll let you know. I totally lost it in the chat. Sorry, keep going.
I just wonder, and I don't think we will ever hear again, like the repercussions of this, and if it's ever brought up. But it's extremely shady that a death occurred on the Enterprise. You know, I just couldn't believe they were able to be so calm about this whole situation in the end.
One of them was I forget who said it in the chat, but it's interesting that we even got to this point because you're talking about the future and this happening on Picard's ship. It's funny how things a lot like also evolved with the Klingons, because if this was like Worf, for example, like, and this was DS9, I know someone in the chat said like Dak'Rah would be dead. Like Worf would have 100% offed him. Like no question, and we wouldn't even be in this position, right? So that's one of them. I'll get back to the other at some point. Yeah.
Well, and there was a whole episode where Worf killed someone. Was it DS9? And Cisco's like, "You can't do that," or was it?
He was going to kill his brother.
Yeah, yeah.
TNG,
Well, it was TNG too. He killed
Yeah.
Duras. He killed Duras.
Yeah, he killed
a lot of
Duras.
people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Worf's
So
gotten away with literal
Worf's got
murder.
A lot of
Literally get away with
yeah.
murder. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Hawk?
Oh, my God. It was totally it was totally sketched that box was in its sick bay at that time. Absolutely. And containing a dagger that goes back to the Klingon War, and like with DNA evidence that was still on it. Like, this is the other kind of big problem in this episode as regards to messaging and perceptions. And the fact that if it was self-defense, like, we literally see Mbenga turn away from that box when the confrontation begins, right? Yeah, everything else gets obscured after that, but this conflict only lasts like for mere seconds, and then that knife made its way out of that box and into Ra's chest. Ra didn't know that knife was there, and this is why I'm leaning towards the fact that, like, Mbenga straight out murdered the guy. But the knife itself, and that contains the DNA evidence of, like, the two captains that were mentioned, Jif, was it Jif and I can't remember, Captain Rouse or something. But the problem with this knife is that in representation, it's almost like a cop who keeps a drop piece in that when he shoots an unarmed suspect. This was the other thing that really kind of put me off on the episode at the end, and the fact that, like, by the end of it, everybody was like, okay, this should have been a huge deal, right? But even Pike is like, well, there'll probably be an inquiry in that. But
that's the other thing I wanted to say. Someone actually said that it's maybe not that big of a deal, because in one way you look at it, if Laurel finds out about this, she goes, "Thanks, you're doing me a favor."
No, the
you,
Klingons
you just
are
killed
fine
a
with
traitor
this.
and a coward. So it's maybe not that big of a deal. Maybe, like, within Starfleet, the fact that something like we were just talking about, so many things had to have gone wrong for it to even get to this point. That's where the problem is.
Yeah. I mean, the Klingons are, I'm sure they're fine with this, right? Starfleet, considering, like, all those orders that went down the line when he was first, like, brought to the ship, and that how everybody was supposed to be courteous and show the guy respect, and that Starfleet had a lot invested in him, and the fact that he's dead now aboard the flagship of the Enterprise, and that it should be huge, but it feels like it's just kind of being swept under the rug. And I think that's the other big problem with the messaging at the end of this episode, and why some people are going to be very angry with it.
MC?
I have thoughts and feelings. In terms of the dagger, I know we've talked about how, people, collect fucked up things. People have trophies. It was a locked away dagger and it's not like he has it out on display. He took it out specifically, opened it up, closed it up again, and then it somehow got involved in this argument with Ra. And in terms of him begging Ra to leave, I think it's specifically because Mbenga knows, like, he's on the brink of killing this guy. He's like, I'm begging you to leave, or else I'm going to fucking kill you. Because, I mean, yes, it's not right to put hands on anybody, but it's not, Ra put a hand on his shoulder. It's not like he would. I'm not trying to justify, touching anybody when they don't want, but it's not like he was, hitting Mbenga. He was not. It was Mbenga who's It was Mbenga who started the fight in the med bay.
We don't see him start the fight.
Well, we don't.
We kind of do, though, because, like, why confront Ra with the truth at that point?
Why is Ra in sickbay in the first place?
Ra was on his way home. He was about to leave that ship, and that
I feel like I said, I think Ra felt this really weird connection with Mbenga. Like kind of saw this kindred spirit. And honestly, kind of did. Like they're these people who both, even if at the very end, Ra was cowardly. He was, on Jagal, there was terrible things that happened. So both Mbenga and Ra experienced just horrific things. And this one event is kind of what turned, I know Mbenga was kind of leaning towards peace before that, but they're both living a lie, because Ra is the one who is, saying that he did this. And Mbenga's not saying that he did it. And I mean, yeah, Ra doesn't know this, but I think in some way, he can almost feel it. So yeah, there's this intrigue with Mbenga. And I mean, like there would, it's not like he, is like trying to hurt Mbenga so that Mbenga won't tell the truth. So yeah, we don't see Mbenga start it, but it's just kind of the feeling that I get from this, especially when we get to the conversation with Chris, because when he's talking to Pike, he's like, I didn't start the fight, but I'm glad I finished it. He's not talking about the fight in sickbay. He's talking about the fight in the Klingon War. He's like, he didn't start the Klingon War.
That I agree with,
he's glad that he finished it in sickbay.
Yeah.
Because he, had unfinished business, having not killed Dak'Rah. I'm not crazy with, I think that Mbenga did a murder, and I'm not happy with it. And I'm also not happy with Christine covering it up, because the way it was acted for me seemed like there was a lot of lying going on, that, Christine knew exactly what happened and she's blatantly covering it up. I don't love it. I understand it, but also I don't love it. So yeah, and also, and I know Julian super disagrees with me on this point. Super disagrees with me. But Mbenga did more damage to Federation and Klingon relations than Michael Burnham.
But Michael Burnham didn't do anything to Klingon relations. That's the thing.
I mean, that's
all the
very
people
true.
that blame Michael for shit need to just fuck off, for one.
Yeah,
Michael didn't start the Klingon War. Takuvma did.
Yeah, I mean, as much as Dak'Rah is a fraud, he has done good things. Because we hear Uhura talk about it at the beginning of the episode. He's done a lot of stuff as an ambassador, and certainly the Federation has a lot of faith in him. I'm not saying that justifies them trotting at this war criminal, but as we see, things are going to be bad for the Federation for 30 fucking years with the Klingons. It's gonna be super, super bad. So, and even if Dak'Rah does not have a good relationship with the Klingons, he still knows, Klingon customs and culture that he can teach to the Federation that they don't know, things that they can use. And that's probably mostly what's been going on, that he's been telling him, this is how you handle the Klingons. So that's just my opinion on it.
So I'm going to go right into Dak'Rah should never, ever, ever, ever been allowed to enter that sickbay period, going back to my former point. Two, everybody's saying, well, maybe Mbenga was premeditating his murder. The only way that this happens is if Dak'Rah comes into sickbay. Mbenga's not going to go on the Enterprise. Nothing in this episode or anything about his character tells me that he's going to go walk the corridors, hunt down Dak'Rah, take the dagger, and stab him through the heart. It's just, sorry, no. And then going back exactly to what Rhianna said, multiple times, exact quotes, and the way he says it. Now, please go away. You shouldn't be here in the first place, and now I'm asking you to go away. Second, please, going like this, leave me alone. I don't want you here. And then to a point, yes, maybe you can interpret, why couldn't you just leave me alone? As, okay, like, I've asked you nicely, you fucked with me, I'm going to kill you. I don't take it that way. That one line, maybe I can interpret that way. It's self-defense. It's murder. It's not murder. Wow. Freudian slip. Dak'Rah should never have been there. And Benga, one, also, he didn't have any of the what was it called? The 12, right? Klingons are stronger, right?
Mm-hmm.
Klingons are stronger. So if he's sparring with this guy, we saw Dak'Rah throw him around already, right? He does have to self-defense, whether he's trying to hold him back or not. Two, as far as Dak'Rah doing good, we talked about this at the beginning of the episode. Dak'Rah, like, Starfleet should never have made Dak'Rah an ambassador. Yes, the United States made ex-Nazis scientists and used them on, like, the Manhattan Project, which is fucked in itself. Or, you know, use them for other shit, but they were never made fucking ambassadors. Never. And you know what happened to them afterwards? They were put on trial by Israel and the United States. Okay? Like, whether he wants to do good is like, yeah, whatever. You're not an ambassador. Like, yeah, teach us some stuff, but like, dude should be on trial, and he should definitely not be an ambassador. So, yeah, I don't think it's murder. I thought that the conversation with Pike and him was really powerful. I don't know where the relationship goes from here. Yeah, no. But that's what I love about this episode. Jeffrey Bird said, like, this conversation is exactly what he wanted to happen. Is it murder? Is it not? That's left for us to decide and debate. And that's what we just did. And I thought it was a really good conversation. So,
Yeah, Julian, I want to mention one more point too, that it's also M'Benga's sick bay. Like, this is another thing, is it's as if, say, Ra came on the bridge and started confronting Pike, and Pike is like, leave, please leave. You know, like, we're thinking about that, you know, that this is M'Benga. He's the literal chief medical officer. This is his sick bay, his domain. And Ra comes in and does all this disrespecting, does all this, like, crossing of his a million boundaries that M'Benga has been putting up this entire goddamn episode. And it's just like, that makes me even more furious that he came into his sick bay to do this.
Like, he just shouldn't have never been allowed.
Sick bay. He doesn't have access to a hypo spray
or any other.
We're gonna use the war crime knife. No, just no hypo spray, just the war crime knife right away.
I don't know. Final thoughts on this episode. Anybody? Free for all. Anybody?
Oh, well, I'm so curious about this discussion about Ra as being an ambassador, because as you said, I think you said, Haven said, this chain of he is kind of pointless. Like, from a Klingon side, no one wants him as an ambassador. Like, he's a coward, he's a traitor. He's not an effective ambassador. I feel like to be an effective ambassador, you have to have, like, good relations on both sides. So if anything,
Taylor.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. Sarek, even to an extent, you know? And so I think he's completely just a figurehead that the Federation just needs to say, hey, look, this Klingon's here. He's nice. Everybody look at him. And we're at peace now. Like, isn't this great? But he's not actually doing anything. Like, yeah, he can talk to humans and he can maybe change some of their perspectives on, like, oh yeah, this is a different type of Klingon, to people who have had, you know, bad dealings with Klingons and bad conceptions. I guess that is valuable, but from it doesn't outweigh how crazy it is at all. So I'm just fascinated by this and deeply confused, as usual, by Starfleet.
Yep. Agreed.
I do need to point out that the Klingons don't think he's a coward. They think he's a traitor. But
that's true. They think he murdered.
They think he murdered a whole bunch of people.
They don't know if he ran away. But that's true.
Oh yeah. Okay, fair. Which is worse, right?
Way worse.
I mean, for a Klingon, it's like, if you're gonna be a traitor, like, that's the way you be a traitor.
True. Yeah.
So one thing that we're gonna try, just from listening to other shows and stuff that we've talked about over the course of the few days, we're gonna move away from rating episodes. I think you could tell by the discussion kind of how each and everyone individually feels about the episode. If you want to talk personally about how we feel, you can reach us. We have great conversations that happen on our Discord. We are always reachable through DMs. We love talking about this episode. That's why we do it each and every week. But we love getting your guys' opinions, which is why we are going to go, I threw away the one page I needed, to the subspace to poll and mailbag.
Shipwide, Cadet Aurora.
Aye, sir.
And Hawk, I didn't ask you before the show. Did you get the numbers by chance? I forgot
actually just put them
The
in about
numbers are
5
in there.
minutes ago.
You're
Yeah, I
the
saw that. That was very
best.
smooth. Yeah.
Well, since you went and did that, would you be a darling and read our subspace to poll this week, please?
I would love to. We asked Trek Twitter, that's what we're calling it until the ship sinks, what they thought of Under the Cloak of War, and this is what they had to say. 64% said an honorable journey. 23% said Raktajino worthy. 7% said room temp gach.
Gross.
And 6% said patak.
All righty. And we are going to go into our mailbag. So Hawk, you went. So MC, can you read Matt Harker's mailbag, please?
Matt Harker wrote, "This week's episode of Strange New Worlds is, for me, potentially one of the most intense episodes of Trek ever. I love the depth at which they explored M'Benga and Chapel's trauma and their struggles to keep it contained. The twist was masterful and even more proof of why we need to support the writers. One last note, just 2 episodes left for Ortegas. She is the final bridge crew to not have their own primary storyline. I am ready."
Indeed. I will go ahead and take Eric the Reds. In the words of a famous Riemann, War, I think I went out of order. That's okay. Rhianna and Ashlyn can go next. Riemann, War never changes. This was a great but difficult episode to digest. I'm glad we got to see M'Benga and Chapel's experience during the war and was surprised it was told via flashback. The episode brought in hints of both Undiscovered Country and DS9. We even got Ortegas in this episode. The ending is absolutely heartbreaking. Even the Spock Chapel scenes this week felt warranted as Spock is trying to understand the ununderstandable. A solid 9 out of 9 Raktaginos. Well said. And Rhianna, can you take Tara's, please? And you get the honor. Tara, one of Tara's traditions each week on our show is that she writes an episode-specific limerick. So you get the honor of doing that, which is pretty cool.
Oh my God, that's amazing. Okay. Tara wrote, "This was a moving portrayal of PTSD, and I appreciate Strange New World's attempts to show us the trauma of war within a Trek context. But I did find the premise a bit hard to swallow. A Klingon ambassador with a history of war crimes at the stage of the Federation development. If I put that aside, however, it is an impressive episode that comes at the right point between 207 and what we might expect from 209. I like the bookend symbolism of the malfunctioning biobed looking fixed but never really being repaired. And now, a limerick that came to me more quickly than most. The wise warrior avoids the battle. Shinzu famously advised, M'Benga tries to live this lesson, but cannot avoid eventual compromise. Chapel and Ortega's scars are still hellishly fresh, and Ambassador Ra is actually a coward in the flesh, but his pretense of peace turns into a catalyst for his ultimate demise." Woo! Poetry.
Awesome. Love it. That was beautiful. I love Giraffe. Everybody's going with this theory right now. Those biobeds have gourd in them. Oh my God. Baby corn.
They do.
Oh my
Baby
God.
corn.
Oh, that's so dark.
That's
I
going to
love
be
it.
episode 10.
That's episode 10, people. Ashley, could you take Yum Yum Pods, please?
Yes, Yum Yum Pod wrote, "It is so telling that this single episode could give us weight and depth to war, while Discovery could not do that in the slightest. Season 2 has been all over the place in quality for me, but I have liked that the ambition has been higher than the last season, and this episode really went in on some tough themes and deep character work. I have been mixed on the fact that Erica's main character trait outside of quips has been bigotry throughout these last several episodes. And if she was a better defined character, I'd probably be able to value what they are wanting to do with her. But currently, I'm just not there. I always shout this show out, but if people are interested in a sci-fi series that really tackles the themes of war and the impact it has on those who serve, please check out Space Above and Beyond.
Very nice. Back to you, Hawk. Can you take Prof Time Travelers, please?
So, Professor Time Traveler. Is that a Community reference?
She's in the chat. Is that a Community reference? Let us know.
Wrote, finally a story about Chapel that isn't about Spock or the search for. And it only took them 18 episodes. I can't help but feel like this episode was trying to do a little too much. The butcher stuff and the murder in particular felt unnecessary and rushed to me. It's like the writers weren't interested in the uncertainty of whether the ambassador was doing good or harm and decided taking him out of the equation was an easier answer. But what's easy doesn't always make for the better story.
True. Can you take Jesco's, please, MC?
Desco wrote, a very intense episode to follow our lighthearted crossover, and I loved every second. The flashbacks were incredibly intense, and I was fascinated by the parallels drawn. Bit like watching MASH meets DS9. Loved all of the food nods to that trek. Nice to get another glimpse into Disco's season 1 timeline. The combat scenes between Joseph and the ambassador had me on the edge of my seat, and they hashed it out with hand and word. Not a satisfying end in some aspects, but certainly an episode I'll be revisiting.
Very nice. Oh, yes, the Gornhub jokes go far, K. Quinn. They go far. Getting Gorny in episode 10. That's right. Let's take Havens. Oh, good, because they made a note about amending theirs. Where is it? There it is. Haven wrote, this episode was a very dark episode when it comes to the theme. Just due to my own personal feelings, I had to pause a couple times at the end. It was a great season 2 episode. Did anyone else feel like the Klingon general was Shapak, who was played by Ron Canada from Rules of Engagement? Because every time Haven heard him, they were thinking of that character, which is a good example. Very kind of similar characters. So
I just kept on thinking of Uriel from Supernatural.
Okay.
Classic.
Yep.
Yeah.
Let's see how many more. Oh yeah. So Rhianna, can you take us home, please, with Jedi Cats?
Sure thing. Jedi Cat wrote, Under the Cloak of War is one of the strongest episodes yet and evokes the spirit of the 1990s Star Trek, delving into shades of gray where the line between right and wrong is blurred to practically nil. It was fascinating yet harrowing to see flashbacks of the Klingon War, and I appreciated their addressing these various issues veterans often face, PTSD, guilt, etc. The cast, especially Babs and Jess, were strong as always, and the ending was as shocking as it was devastating. My only criticism is that Ortegas's bigoted language and behavior, which I also noticed in Ad Astra. I assumed it an aberration in Quality of Mercy because it was an alternate timeline, but this seems to be one of her traits, and it bothers me to see an otherwise likable character who's one of the few Latinas in Star Trek have this potentially ugly side to her.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Very much.
Well
Great points. Well said. The last thing I want to say, this is definitely a bit of a controversial episode, right? Like lots of different ways to take this. We happen to be part of just like an amazing community of other Trek podcasts, right? Giraffe was on, I mentioned earlier, Star Trek Discovery Pod, like a lot of great views there last night. I highly suggest you go watch that. Our friends at Open Pike, their review of this episode is going to have someone who did serve, and they're going to have a veteran's point of view. So really awesome community of Trek podcasts, all with different point of views. I highly suggest you check them out. With that being said, this was an absolute pleasure. Rhianna and Ashlyn, always just love having you guys on. Please tell us more about what's going on, plug away, and where can people find you?
Yes. So right now we are doing the engineering series. We have released the TOS and TNG episodes. We're looking forward to Deep Space Nine, Voyager, talking about in-depth our amazing engineers, and also it's a big technobabble feature. We're reading so much technobabble. I have a completely new respect for the actors.
Praise.
Our literal question of the week every week is, what's your favorite technobabble? So we have to write it down.
Yeah, so that's, for me, that's like one of my passions is technobabble. So this has been a really fun series. And Rhianna, where can they find us?
Oh my gosh, everywhere. We are on the burning ship that is Twitter still. You can find us there. We are also on Threads. We are on TikTok. We are on
Blue
Instagram.
Sky.
We're on
Yeah.
Blue Sky. We're on Tumblr. We have a Patreon. What did I say? Facebook. We're on Facebook as well. Anywhere you can find social media, we're probably there in some form, except for Pinterest. That's one thing we haven't gotten on for some weird reason.
Don't bother.
But yeah, so find us anywhere, talk to us. We're pretty chatty, and we're usually on there unless Twitter, stops us from talking to people. But otherwise, we're everywhere. So
That's
come
the
find
next
us.
phase of Twitter.
Yeah, right.
The next
Yeah.
phase.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. By the way, you have to pay to actually tweet now. That Elon would, right?
He would, yeah.
Oh my God. Anyway, guys, it was an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much. And
Thank you.
we have a lot to look forward to working together with our upcoming podcast festival that we are co-running. That is the Last Days of Disco coming up in late 2023, early 2024. Very excited. With that, guys, things are happening next week. Episode 209, Subspace Rhapsody. I'm bursting. Cannot
This
wait.
is the
so excited.
Trek equivalent
Bursting into
of
song.
Barbenheimer. I'm saying,
Oh my
we get
God,
this really
yes.
dark one, and then we're getting a musical next
literally.
week. Yeah,
Oh my
That is
God.
Barbenheimer.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
So cannot wait to review that one. We will have that for you at our hopeful we'll be back to normal time next week, 9:30 Eastern on YouTube. So for Rhianna, for Ashlyn, for Hawk, for MC, I am Julian. I will say live long and prosper. Maj